yeah, so we only have taken really 2 trips in our life. So that was that. And then still, I went back to school in second year university, but really I got into, I'm taking science and that, but really I was interested in poetry and philosophy and existentialism. I got really deeply involved in that. I met a couple of girls in a coffee house. I fell in love with one of them. Of course, I got heartbroken within a couple of months. And this was in going back to university. Once that happened, I had gone through so much inner change and I was feeling so much pain, I stopped being interested in the studies. And, but so my studies were suffering, but I really was still at university. I was there halfway. Mostly I was hanging around the coffee house. Then at the last phase of this, see, these are going through lines and hexagrams and things as well, but it's still in the, this is all still within the Libra, Sag, Gemini phase. And the last part of Gemini phase, I remember I took a trip to Greenwich Village. It was in the fall, I think. And I'd been there. I was there for 2 or 3 days. I hadn't slept, and I was just hanging. I met this one person, this lady, and we were talking, and we went to a coffee shop, and we were sitting having coffee. But I must have passed out or something because I was just so exhausted. But she took care of me. I ended up waking up in bed with her in the middle of Harlem, which at that time was solid black environment. So like it was a funny little thing. It was the first time in my life that I ever experienced being the only white guy in a total black environment. You know, but it didn't really matter. It was just it was a significant independent moment for me, breaking patterns and getting out of the little world I grew up in. So that was Sag. Now from here, it's still Sag. So this theme of traveling and learning from philosophies and other teachings were there, but the Gemini phase really made me really independent and want to go and travel. And in this, the Gemini Pentan. So then this is me in the next year. Still had the bearded hair go a bit longer. So this is the Cancer Sag, the Scorpio Sag Cancer Pentan, the sub-pentan. It's not like anything has exact big insights, but you see, like I go through and I see these themes, and as I see the themes, I wonder, and I feel them, and all of a sudden it reinforces the understanding of how these themes worked and how I was living inside of it. More than rationally, it's more an inner sense that developed in me for this. And you wouldn't go this far working with someone else's chart. You look at main themes, you see the general themes going in. You would when they're into a crisis or a dilemma or a crisis in consciousness or life, then you would go down this deeply into a chart and tap meanings out of it. So again, we're just working with the signs and the pentans and the sub-pentans. So we're getting this 3 level, again, hours, minutes, seconds, 3 levels of functioning. So here it went into this, when it went into the Cancer theme, went in January. I was going to quit school, but I went to my mom's place. I was more or less just staying on my folks had split up, and I was staying downtown mostly. I went back to my mom's place. I was living in her place from January to June. But for the first 6 months, or first 6 weeks of January into February, I just stayed in the room. I didn't come up. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I had the heartbreak. I was questioning myself. And I was just deeply in a, I guess you'd call it depression or funk or something. I was just alone. I was writing some poetry, just being on my own. It was my first time really being alone like that in my life. So that was a dramatic point. But it was the points of me getting the point of realizing I didn't belong not only in school, at home. It was like feeling the need to be at home and then realizing I used it, but I really had to leave there. I couldn't stay. So in that period, I was writing all these death poems. I shaved my head bald, I stayed out of school, stayed in the room for 6 weeks. And I basically, by February, I'd quit college in spirit. But to satisfy my mom and I'm being there, I went back to go to the classes and to go back and I maintained a facade of it. But really, I was going down, I was working in the coffee houses, I was writing poetry, and by the end of the year, by April, I'm on my own and no relationships, and I ended up with 1 credit. I flunked most of the stuff. I really hadn't done any work on it, so that was it. So then when that finished, by May, we're still in the Scorpio, Sag, Cancer. I left Montreal. I just hitchhiked to Kelowna and the West Coast down to Oregon. I was going back to the year before I went down to California, down to San Francisco. I had a lot of adventures and experiences. So I was going back a memory to try and see what would be there. I felt drawn to go back to that because I had friends and people I met there on my own, nothing related to family. So there still was a Cancer theme in that. Even though I was leaving home, I was going back to a place that I felt secure in. But going down the West Coast into California, I was feeling secure in a place that there really was no security. It was a crazy time, but it felt like home. By June, I was in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury, a lady named Jackie, Sue Diggers, was hanging out at the Blue Unicorn Coffee House. So it's just tripping out in San Francisco through June. But in June in San Francisco, this was 66. So this is in the year 65 was the bigger year. The first time I went down. 66 was the next time. But I bought my first. I saw some books. There were some books on the occult, and I was curious. I wanted to get something deeper to read. And there was a book on the tarot and a book on the I Ching sitting beside each other. And I'm trying to decide which one am I going to get. And just on an instinct, I liked the drawing of the I Ching and the symbols around it. I said, well, I'm just going to take the I Ching one. It's a bit more, seems a bit more philosophical. They both could have worked, but I took the I Ching books. That was the starting point. And the next month, I met Swami Prabhupada. He had just come from the East Coast, and he got a house, and he was in a house, made a little temple in his house on Haight Street. And you'd go in and you could do some chanting with him there. So that's when I met him, and he was the first master met that was teaching chanting and stuff up to Hare Krishna. This was before all the big Krishna consciousness movement made it. It was just the beginnings of it. So I had met him there, and that was a fairly strong influence. So those two things were influences. I just mark them in. I put them in because they're in this point, but they affected my whole life. Those were the book, the reading them. They affected my feelings and my sense of security. By running into these other philosophies, Indian and Chinese, Sagittarius, and provided a depth to study, which I've been studying all my life ever since. So then, but that's in the middle of a chaotic world. So I was staying at people's places. This was like the peak of Haight-Ashbury and tune in, turn on, drop out of psychedelics. So things happen in San Francisco. I hitchhiked to LA, to Venice Beach. I lived in Venice Beach for a while. I went to North Hollywood. I met in coffee house. I met a girl named Lana. I met her on the beach. I was just walking along the beach, had nothing. She was lying on the beach sunbathing. And we started talking. She was gay. So she was totally gay all her life, but we connected, and I went and stayed with her for a while. I was staying with her at her house, at her apartment for a few weeks, or I don't know, remember how much time. But her girlfriends were so mad. They were trying to kill me because they didn't think she should be with a guy. So anyways, that built up until finally I left. But that was the beginnings of the coming up to the sun, of my progressed sun squaring my Pluto, where there were things going on. There started to be more dangerous elements involved in it. Okay, they weren't like idle threat things happening. There were like I really wasn't conscious of that. So then, anyways, I went from San Francisco back to Canada. In this trip, we traveled up the coast. And I went with 3 or 4 friends who were going up the coast, and we were going across the border in Washington to Vancouver. And when we got to the border and the Canadian border, they wouldn't let 3 of the friends in. They wouldn't let them into the States. So I decided to go back with them into the States. They wouldn't let them into Canada. I would go back to the States, and they wouldn't let me go back into the States. So at that border, I had another Plutonian confrontation. What, the system's not letting them in, they're not letting me back. We have to split up. So I had to say goodbye to my friends and go back into Canada on my own. So I don't know, it seems silly now, but it was a big deal at the time. And then I went up to Vancouver. I was involved in Vancouver, and from Vancouver, I ended up, after being there, started hitchhiking to Calgary. An interesting thing on the way to Calgary was I was hitchhiking, and they had come across the border in the meantime, and they were traveling on, and they're driving along, and they found me, and they picked me up when I was hitchhiking on my way to Calgary. So it's funny how you have connections and they meet, but this was all in the middle of, I was the hippie. There was the freedom and those things were going on, but there was a lot of movements against those things going on at the same time too. So then I went to Calgary and I got a job at the bookstore at the University of Calgary. So still, okay, wait, where are we here? That was the end of the cancer mood, of the cancer pentans. The coming back to Canada, coming back home, being in Vancouver, staying in Calgary. But in Calgary, I decided I would get a job there rather than go all the way home. This was the first year I did not go home. So by that was the point where it squared Pluto. I made the decision I'm not going home. I'm just staying. So this was the point where I never went back home, and I was on my own from then. So 66, 1920. I'm just before I was 20. But I'd been living outside and more or less on my own for a couple of years anyways. But here's a picture of me when I worked at the Calgary bookstore. And I was so uptight, like I cut my hair back, and when I was so uptight, you could see the Pluto squaring, my son squaring the Plutos. Angry, even when I had to go take that passport picture or picture for this job, I was angry and stressed. So there was a frustration in it. So that I worked at the Calgary bookstore, so they were just starting the store, so I got the job. But I was living with a jug band, a Brute Force jug band, and we hung around. But like, still, sometimes they didn't have money. They would raid gardens to get food to feed themselves. So it was really in an alternative culture. Really, the job was just something I did that made a bit of money. I went in and did that, and that was. I probably lasted for a month at that, and I don't think I was there much more than that. Couple of paychecks, but then once I had the money, I decided I'm not staying there, and I decided to return to Calgary. That October, I decided to return to San Francisco and try and find Jackie, who I had this relationship with for a while in San Francisco, and I really felt that she was the one to be with me and that whatever, but more the muse. Anyways, I went back, I couldn't find her, but in that time there was a lot of crazy things going on in San Francisco. I can't tell this without telling the whole story, so I just out of the story, it's still the progressions of what's going on. It's not measuring the progressions. It's just I'm acting out my life in this way, but an inner part of me is growing through looking at this. But I was staying in different places, hanging around, going different places. I remember one day I was arrested for sleeping in a house, and at the house, everybody in the house got arrested because everyone was just crashing this vacant house. But there was one young girl in there. There was about 18 people or 10 or 15 people staying in there. It's a big place. But one of the girls in there was underage and had some seeds of marijuana, so we all got arrested. And I was 3 or 4 days in jail without. I don't have a phone number. I don't have anyone to call. This is part of the Pluto. So I'm sitting there alone in this prison. I'm kind of mad, but there's nothing I can do. They gave me a phone. They took me the phone so you can have one phone call. I had no number to call, so I just sat down. But I'm just sitting there meditating. I'm sitting contemplating. And after a couple of days, after a day or so or two of doing this, I noticed there was some other guy doing the same thing, just sitting there, not talking to anybody, just being quiet. And after a couple of days, we noticed we're both doing the same thing, so we started talking to each other. We got in this big discussion. It's a little guy. He looked kind of like a biker, but he was opposite, different from me. He had tattoos. He was just tough, beady-eyed, but we were in this intensity. We were talking about, we got into 3 days of intensity, consciousness, reality, metaphysical. I was surprised that he'd even taken acid or anything like, but we got in this intense discussion, and he felt consciousness was power and he would kill for it. And I thought, no, consciousness is this, you have to surrender to get it. We had this discussion, went on for 3 days till we got out. Okay, but it turns out that guy was Charlie Manson 3 years before all the other stuff happened. So I ran into different people like that. I ran into Jimi Hendrix once, just at a party. No big deal. We didn't really talk or anything. But just that was San Francisco in the time. You would run into places, you'd be places that was very free flowing.